When you're studying for exams, sometimes the hardest part of the exam study is actually getting into the exam and actually performing well in the exam. So if you've spent weeks and months and possibly even years getting ready to do something, and then it comes down to a final 3-hour exam, that's a hell of a lot of stress to put on somebody to perform really, really well. Now, I won't go into the whole argument about exams aren't really important. If you're watching this video, the exam is important to you. Okay, so if it's important to you, I want to show you how to reduce your stress level and how to perform better in the exam. Now, this is an exam technique that was taught to me many, many years ago by my Year 11 engineering science teacher, Mr. Cleaton. Thank you very much. And this has served me very, very well. I've explained this to thousands and thousands of students at high school and university level over the past 20 years that I've been teaching, and it works. Right? It just works. And it's not something that you need to think too hard about, but it is a technique where you need to give up a little bit of your, preconceptions, okay, before you go into it. And once you start doing it, you'll realize that you actually get more benefit out of it. So let me just justify all of this first. So the exam technique that I'm going to explain to you is pretty much based on the way your brain works. Now, the problem with most people is that they program their brain wrong. So let me explain what a brain is. So we've got our brain, which looks strangely like a cloud or a piece of cauliflower or something along those lines. But this is your brain. Your brain works in parallel. Okay? It does multiple things at exactly the same time. It's sort of like having an i7 or an i9 or something like this. Where you've got multiple cores in your processor and it's doing multiple things at the same time. Your brain's been doing that for 1 million years. Okay? You need to program it properly, however, in order to make the most use out of its capabilities. Now, at the moment, your brain is processing your food, it's processing what you had for lunch and breakfast, it's putting all of the glucose into your brain so that you can think and watch this video, it's keeping your eyelids awake while you're watching this video, it's regulating your heartbeat, it's doing all of these sorts of things, and you're thinking at the same time. You're thinking about this video, you're thinking about what you need to do later, you're thinking about all these other things, and your brain is doing all of this at the same time. We need to focus that energy, we need to program it properly so that your brain will work like that for you in an exam. Now, most people, when they get into an exam, they'll start the exam, they'll look at question 1, then they'll go to question 2, then they'll go to question 3, and so on and so forth. That is what's known as serial programming. So programming in serial means you do it that one, that one, that one, that one, right? One after the other. Okay? Now, the thing is, exams are written like this. Right? Because the way we write things is we write it in serial, okay? Well, the way we read things is we read it in serial. Our brain works in parallel, so we have to do a serial to parallel conversion. If you're a tech person, you'll understand what I mean. But we need to program it so all of these individual components are all going in at exactly the same time, or close to, okay? So here's the way I recommend we do it, right? We're going to go through the exam slowly, and we're going to read through the exam completely before we start doing anything else. Now, this is a well-recognised need for students, and most exams start with a 5 or 10 minute reading time. Now, the problem is when people go in and they do their reading in an exam, they start reading the exam and they're just reading through the exam, right? Let's say they're evaluating the exam. So you've spent weeks and months preparing for this exam, you go into the exam, and what you're doing is you're looking at the questions and you're asking yourself, am I able to do this question or not? Right? You see people in exams, if you look around the room while you look in that time, as I've done hundreds and hundreds of times now while I'm invigilating exams, you see people go through the exams and then they either feel more stressed or happy because they either know the answers or don't know the answers for an exam. All of that's completely irrelevant though, right? The thing is, you've got this time before the exam starts, before the official time starts, to start doing things with your brain. So the first pass through, so pass number 1, through the exam is going to just be evaluating. So we're going to evaluate the exam. Now, this is like, shaking the sillies out. It's getting rid of all of that excess nervous energy. It's working at working it out of your brain. You see, the thing is, your brain will do what you tell it to. So serial parallel conversions, all the rest of these sorts of things sounds like a computer term. Yeah, your brain is a computer. Another thing computers do is they do exactly what you tell them to do. So we need to do that with our brain. So when you're evaluating the exam, all you're doing is getting rid of that programming that you've already got. Okay, so you read question 1, you work out whether you can do it or not. Read question 2, question 3, question 4. You're basically going yes, yes, no, 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 yes, no, yes, yes, no, 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 all the way through the exam. And that's really what you're doing. You're just working out, can I answer this question or not? Do I have this knowledge? Have I studied this particular topic or not? And you'll either feel more stressed or happy or comfortable, or at least you'll develop some sort of idea about that. But the thing is, you haven't really programmed your brain yet. So the first pass is an evaluation. You're getting rid of all of that excess energy, but you haven't done anything yet with your brain. You haven't actually started the exam. Part 2. This is where you actually go through the exam and you start programming your brain properly. Okay. Now, the exam is written serially, so you have to read it serially, but you want all of these things to go into your brain at once. So you need to go through the exam without doing the exam. Pens down, go through the exam, read it again. Now you might think, well, wait a second, I've just read the exam. You didn't read the exam, you evaluated the exam. Okay? You've got to read the exam. So this is how we're going to start. We're going to read the exam. And I'll underline, read the exam. Okay? So this is when you start getting it into your head. So you need to go through and carefully read every single question again. Okay? But this time with the intent to program your brain. So imagine your brain as a whole bunch of little brain people. The first time you went through the exam, you asked these brain people, do I have this knowledge? Can I do this question? And they've just gone, yes, and then they've gone and sat down because your brain is extraordinarily lazy. Okay? So these little brain people are just waiting for you to program it properly. Now, when you start reading the exam, you're going to tell these little brain people to go away and start searching your memory banks for the answers. You're going to try to find that information out there in your brain, right? So these little people will go away and do these tasks if you ask them to go and do it. Not to evaluate, not can I do this? That's not the question you want to ask. The question you want to ask is the question that's on the paper, right? You want to send these little fellas away to get that information for you. So we're going to go reading through the entire exam. Third time, and we've already gone through the exam twice. Well, actually, we've gone through it once, okay, properly. But we've gone through it twice. Third time, guess what? We're going to go through the exam again. But this time, you get your pen in your hand, okay? So when you start going through it the third time, these little fellas up here that you programmed to go away and get that information, they'll start coming back to you, and they'll start waving things around, and they'll give it to you, right? And you need to acknowledge them because they're extraordinarily lazy and they're a little bit temperamental. So if you've got this little guy coming back going, I've got question 1, look, there's a wonderful piece of knowledge about question 1, and he's giving it to you, if you ignore him, he's just going to go, question, fine, I'm just going to go over here. And you've all had this experience before. You've all been at a party or at a get-together with somebody, you can't remember somebody's name, right? And then you think, oh man, I know this guy's name, You're talking to him and thinking, no, and you either ask someone later or you just, leave it there. You've asked your brain what this person's name is. You haven't really paid much attention to it. And then at 2 a.m. you wake up and it's Steve! And you remember it. Your brain people will go off and find this information. They will work it out, right? And then they'll come back to you. But you've got to pay attention to them, okay? So you need to pay attention to these. So if he's coming back with question 1, you start at question 1. You write down the information you have. So I'm going to answer the question. So I'm going to write down whatever my little brain people are coming back and telling me. So start at question 1. Question 1 person's come back with the answer. Write it down, or as much of the answer as you can, or just the topic that you're dealing with, or part of the calculation, or whatever information the brain person is telling you, you come back, you write the thing down. Okay? If question 6 person comes back while you're working on question 1, get question 6's information, write it down next to question 6, pat the little fella on the head, send him off for some more information. That sort of encouragement to these little brain people will be exactly what they need. So if you give them the encouragement, you tell them to go back and get more information, they'll do exactly that. Okay? So we've gone through the paper once to evaluate it, getting rid of all of those funny things that you have in your head about can you do this or can't you do this, right? We've gone through and we've read it to program our brains. We've gone through it the third time where we've written down all of that basic first round information and we've put that down on paper. Fourth round, that's when we really start to answer it. And you'll notice their answer without the quote marks. Okay, so this is when you're really answering the question. So this is when you start actually doing the paper properly. So you go through it when you start working on it. Start at question 1, go through when you do it. Start at question 2, go through when you do it. If you can't do it, jump to question 3. Maybe question 7 guy comes back and he's got some more information. Fine, skip to question 7, write it down. Go back to question 3, question 4, wherever you're at, and just continue on with that. Work through the paper methodically. If you can't answer something, your little brain person hasn't come back with the answer yet. Now, the thing is, you might think this is all a big waste of time, but the reality is this. You do this in the reading time, so it hasn't wasted any of your time at all in the exam. You do this during reading time and also at the beginning of your writing time. Okay, so it's only going to take a little bit of time for it, but this means that you program your brain completely. So if you read all of those questions in the first 5 actual minutes of your exam, you've got a 3-hour exam, then that means you've got 2 hours and 55 minutes where every single question is programmed into your brain. So every question now you're going to be working on for 2 hours and 55 minutes, right? Not 3 hours divided by 10 questions and working that out. It's 2 hours 55 or 3 hours for every single question that you have. And you're either able to do it or not able to do it. And the thing is, if you're sending these little guys away to get information, even if you can't answer the question, if you've worked out finally at the end of everything that you can't answer the question, at least you'll have a ton of information that you can put down to partially answer the question, to show that yes, you do understand it, to show that you have some basic knowledge of what you're doing, and you might get some marks for it, right? I think you'd be surprised. So going through it like this, evaluating, reading properly to program your brain, answering the question, getting all of this information, just dumping it down on paper, and then going through it methodically answering the questions, that's going to set you up to do your absolute best in an exam. And last thing I have to say to you is good luck.